Requests for information, quotation, or proposals are quintessential to many sales contracts, especially complex ones. You know, most businesses over the counter, we don't do anything like this, right? Like if you go to a store, the deal is all in one and a point of sale. But in complex deals between businesses and governments, you will often have to do certain formal reporting. And that's where it's helpful to be aware of this. Whether you're in sales or not, you could come across where salespeople will be asking for information in your department to help fill that request so that we can build and grow our company type thing. The benefits of sales requests allows those asking for bids to formalize the sales pitch and a goal. It allows vendors to have a clear direction. And for both sides, we have an established evaluation process, especially for governments because they have to remain compliant, as well as nonprofits. There are many opportunities for small businesses to win contracts for services and goods at the government level, whether it's at municipalities or state or federal. So government is usually, government sourcing is usually contract-based and on a bidding process. Nonprofits have a higher bar of requiring a formal bidding process, like $20,000 or plus. Don't quote me on that, but usually the bigger the contract, the more formal it needs to be. Almost all government contracts have to have a formal bidding process. And so just be aware that, even certain contracts that you wouldn't expect that, they might be bidding. There are incentives for competitively locally sourced contracts. So if you're a local vendor, they might give you an incentive to want to hire locally if you have a good bid. It looks good politically, sadly, especially for municipalities. For example, Santa Ana looking to find local vendors to do all their work instead of going to other city vendors. Large contracts also have incentive for small businesses to anybody's surprise. If you're working, if a big business is looking to get a federal contract, if they're working with smaller vendors already to help feed the need of that contract, they can make that pitch that they're helping small businesses, and that adds weight to the competitiveness of a contract, which in some gray areas is helpful for them when contracts may not be as lucrative but are more established. What do I mean by this? For example, you should be networking with big businesses because you could work with them on those government bids even if you cannot fully meet them. Their needs. That business can. You're just filling a gap for them and looking more competitive. So plenty of incentives and you get paid for it, and a great way to enter into new sales contracts with governments. There are three types: the request for information, a request for quotation, and a request for proposal. Each come with different complexities. The length and style will depend on if it's business to business, government contract, or non-governmental organizations like nonprofits. As I mentioned, there's a minimum standards of evaluation process depending on the size of the contract. When you're trying to ask for businesses to do for bids or quotations or information, you need to ask yourself what is needed. How specific do you need to be? And do you have a vendor shortlist? In business to business or in other sourcing contracts for departments in a company, they might have a shortlist of people they prefer to work with. Why is that? Whether there is a blacklist of vendors you should avoid, is there a better working relationship, they understand your systems better. There could be a number of reasons why that may not necessarily meet the particular cost or that they're the cheapest one in town. But this requires you going through your company protocols. There is a handbook on sourcing in the company. When you are looking at the different types, request for information, you're generally looking for information. It's broad, open-minded. They might propose more solutions than you expected. A request for proposal is more comprehensive. You're evaluating the merits of each vendor. And the requests for quotes are very specific, meeting cost and time and implementation needs. Generally, The RFI, it's open questions, it's informational, it's casual. RFQs are structured, they're quotes, they're invoices, they're very specific, and you'll know when it's a request for quote, they're actual offers. Requests for proposals, on the other hand, it's an opening bidding process, and I want to explain more of that in a second. Make sure you have templates to work with should one not be provided. A general template to work with for you is to have a lot of information on hand, especially if you're new to this. But if you're experienced, you need to have a great basis to pull out information easily. And if you need more current information, go into those respective departments to gather it. You need a statement of need, background of your organization, qualifications and credentials, particularly if licenses are needed, information requested, what you could hopefully learn or provide, selections of experts or people that you want to put into the line of the proposal, and the time responses required. In a proposal process, you'll have the initial draft, you'll have the time required for scoring and evaluation, and then they're going to evaluate and analyze who's going to fit the shortlist. And they're going to probably bring you in they'll probably ask for more questions, and that's okay. But if they're asking questions that like you should have kind of answered, that you might sound weaker in the proposal process, but generally don't be afraid of questions. That's just them making sure that they weight this correctly. But definitely count on follow-up proposals or presentations, potentially in person. And in the final selection and negotiation, heading into a request for quotation, there's going to be pricing and legal negotiations. Still requiring still back out options if they want, but this is where your high-level executives come in. In the request for quotation, remember, this is a formal contract per se. And so they're going to be asking for specific costs, specific implementation timeframes, as well as any other standard form agreements that might be attached. So have one ready in your department. They should already have standard form agreements and standard quotations or invoices ready for you to use. It's good every now and then to review those and make sure that they're up to date. Have all documents ready, have a vendor list ready, closed, identify risk tolerance. In managing and organizing requests for quotations, have these documented and listed and filed appropriately. Observe confidentiality in requests for proposals and quotations. NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to protect proprietary information is usually listed and taken care of prior. And then in closing, make sure that signatures and appropriate meeting of the minds and details are met. When dealing with repeat vendors, these just, you have your basic standards that follow, so that should be followed for future contracts, and they will know those customs as well. For you, you'll just start invoicing at that point, particularly for multiple or subcontracts of the contract. On that note, I love quotations, I love proposals and bidding. It's complicated, it's fun, but they're very helpful for both sides. And just know as a small business, there is access for you to bid for government and non-governmental agency-based contracts, whether they're big or small.